Hi there, this is Jen, and thanks for joining me today for the November Card Hoppin event. This is an event where a few of us get together and create based on a theme and a technique. So for the month of November, the theme is sparkle, and the technique is using either foil or drops. And I'm going to go ahead and use drops today in my video. And if you would like to participate in the hops, we would love to have you. I'll go ahead and leave a link for the group below, and you can go ahead and join that. But to get started for my card, my first card today, I'm going to go ahead and use some items from my stash. And the first one is this Carabel Studios stamp, the snowman, and then the sentiment I'm getting from the Make It Jolly stamp set from scrapbook.com. And then from Not Too Shabby, I'm using the Plaids for Christmas, which is a really beautiful a paper pad. And I went ahead and I stamped up my stamp with some VersaFine black. I colored it with my Tombows and water, and then went ahead and used a die to cut it out. And since this is a smaller stamp, I wanted to kind of layer it up using the different papers so that it didn't look so lonely on the 4¼ by 5½ card. And so I'm kind of mixing some solid cardstock with some of that Plaids for Christmas paper, just using different die shapes to cut out those squares just to add a little bit of interest. And I'll go ahead and adhere all of those together. And then for my drops for this card, I'm actually using Stickles, and this is frosted lace. And I'm going to add a little bit of those on the scarf of the snowman, and then I'm going to add some underneath the snowman to act as snow. So hopefully that comes through on the video. I'm not sure how well because it's the stickles are pretty clear, but hopefully you'll be able to see some sparkle. And then I went ahead and I added a double bow, and that's going to finish off the first card. And this is such a cute snowman, but I couldn't find a name on the package for what stamp it was. If I can find that, I'll add it to the description below. For my next card, I am going to use a paper rose 6x6 stamp. It's not stamp. A paper pad called Poinsettia Garden. And for my drops, I'm going to be using Stickles again. This time I'm going to use it through a stencil and then also use them as drops. But to get my card ready, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take this paper, the poinsettia part mainly, and I am adding some adhesive to the back of that. And then I'm putting that onto a piece of, I believe this is 110 or 120 pound cardstock. And I'm adding the cardstock behind it to make sure that when I pop this up, because I'm going to be cutting this out and popping it up with foam, and because it is a thinner paper, I didn't want it to buckle or have ripples in it, which can happen sometimes. And so by adding that cardstock, it's just giving it a little bit of extra support for the card. So I'm going to go ahead and take my Cutter Bee scissors, and I am going to go around the edge of this poinsettia image. And how you cut this is totally up to you. As you can see here, I cut these little berries off. I didn't want to cut around them, but for the rest of the image, I do cut around all of the little bits and pieces. You don't have to. You can cut off pieces you don't want, keep pieces you do want. And so I'm just kind of moving my scissors back and forth, adding a little bit of, I call it wiggle, but just some movement so that it's not like straight cuts. And once I have that done, I'm going to go ahead and start on the background. So I'm using actually the reverse side of the poinsettia paper, which has this kind of script writing on it. And I'm going to take this brick stencil and tape it down. And for this one, I am using some gold Stickles. And I'm not going to be using a ton of it. I'm not covering the entire background. I'm just going to kind of concentrate it in one little area so that I don't use up too much of the Stickles. And of course, this is something you could use your pastes for, but I don't have that many pastes. I think I have like maybe a few, and they tend to dry up even you know, putting a piece of plastic wrap over the top, which is what I try and remember to do before I put the cap on, just to keep those from drying up. But Stickles, they don't dry up, and at least in my experience, I'm not saying they won't dry up. They could definitely do it, but I find that my Stickles are good to go whenever I need to use them, and so it's just a great way. And if you have a lot of different drops, like the Nuva drops or anything like that, and maybe you just need like a little bit of that color here and there through a stencil, it's a really great way to kind of use up those supplies. And if you're like me and at one time felt that you needed a whole bunch of Nuvo drop colors and now you're not using them, this would be a great way to go ahead and use up some of those supplies. But once I have gotten kind of the pattern that I want on my card, I'm going to go ahead and take the stencil off. I set this aside actually overnight to let it dry, and then went ahead and adhered it to a card mat. And then I added a bunch of foam squares to the back of my poinsettia piece, and I will remove all of the backing papers and add that to the left side of that card. And then I'll take my scissors and remove the excess paper that's hanging over the edge. And then I added a sentiment. I stamped this up from a stamp from my stash, and then added it, but I don't know if I like it too much, so I think I might end up covering that or trying to remove it. But that just says Merry Christmas. And then to finish the card off, I'm going to use some more of the Stickles, and I am going to just add those in different areas over that pattern paper. You can also take the Stickles and take your spatula and kind of spread those out a little bit if you wanted to, not use them as drops, but use more as a paint, or even use a brush. Might be a little bit easier to kind of spread those out. I think I went a little bit overboard, but it definitely meets the sparkle requirement for the theme for this month. But that's going to do it for my cards today. I will go ahead and leave a link for the next person in the hop, as well as the entire hop order. So I hope you check us all out. As always, if you like this video or found it informative, I would love it if you would give a thumbs up. Thanks so much for hanging out with me today, and I hope to see you next time.